Day 2, May 7, 2019, Poulsbo, Washington. You ever wake up in the morning and ask yourself, what am I doing? And more importantly, why? Yeah, me too. Hi, my name's Craig, and this is my story. A story about life out there. For visuals while listening, search Life Out There on your favorite social media platform or use the links in the podcast description. Hey there, welcome back. So, with my first few life in an RV lessons under my belt, it's time to get on with the adventure, get on with the exploring. The point of this whole adventure is to get out there, to see things, to experience life in and learn about different parts of the country. What starting in my own backyard has done was show me that if there was this amazingly beautiful place, this fascinatingly historic area, all within 50 miles or so from where I had spent the last 23 years of my life, and I knew nothing about it, what must the rest of the country have to offer? I'm actually getting a little more excited at this point. And at the same time, I'm reflecting again. I tend to do that. So before I dig into where I am right now, in my head I'm revisiting that list, all the places that led me to Washington. Remember in episode 1 when I recalled writing down all the places I had lived, 22 of them? I'm thinking back over each of those spots and wondering what I missed. Imagining all I don't know about them, because I wasn't looking. For most of them, I was a kid. And let's face it, when I was 6, I couldn't get past the fact that my new friend had a brand new emerald green Schwinn bike. The kind of emerald green, with the paint flakes in it that made it shimmer in the sun when he rode it, complete with a banana seat, a sissy bar, and an orange flag whipping in the wind. He nearly sent me over the edge when he showed up with a headlight and taillight kit on it, the kind that powered up automatically every time he pedaled because of some fancy new power generating device on his back tire. Me? I was lucky to have my Kmart special. The faded blue bike with scruffs and scratches and the left handlebar grip missing, no banana seat, no sissy bar, no flag whipping in the wind. And God knows there was no auto-powered headlight or taillight kit in my future. I was lucky to have reflectors. I had 2, one on the front, one on the back. The one on the front was even white, so according to Mom, I wasn't lucky, I was blessed. And every time the subject was brought up with Mom, I got, "Don't be silly. You know we don't have that kind of money." What I can now translate that into as an adult is what she was really saying was, "Seriously, dude? I can barely afford toast and tuna and you want a new bike with a headlight? Get over yourself. Now go do your chores and then you can watch Gilligan's Island. You got it good, kid. We have a TV that gets all 3 channels and it has a clicker. Now stop complaining and go feed your horses." Horses are always mine, I thought, when it's time to feed them. I also thought, I'm going to get me that damn bike. The point here is that at 6 years old and all the drama in my life, how could I possibly be expected to be concerned with who discovered Gilroy, California? How many super cool things might have happened here before I got here, all those 6 years ago? And final point, I have a different perspective now. I'm making a mental note at this point that I want to go back to each of those places. I want to explore them with this new perspective, but at the same time, remember them through the eyes of 5, 8, 12, 15-year-old Craig. But most importantly, I want to appreciate and enjoy them. Something I am pretty sure I hadn't done the first go-around. So I'm writing down those 22 places again, here. This will be my permanent record of places to revisit at some point. So here we go. Where did Craig happen? How did Craig happen? Well, according to my birth certificate, it all started in a place called Mountain View, California. From there, San Jose, California. In my extremely underdeveloped brain at the time, I can recall 2 houses, maybe, in San Jose. Then it was on to Gilroy, California, where there would be 3 homes in 10 years during the Gilroy years. Next up, North Branch, Minnesota, for a 4-year stint in what this 15-year-old brain recalls as a frozen wasteland. Then, back to the West Coast, this time, Fall Creek, Oregon. I would leave Fall Creek and move to Eugene after graduating from high school. Eugene would total 3 separate apartments over the next 8 years. From Eugene, it was off to Honolulu with my best friend on some half-baked, not very well thought out, but fun scheme to move to the island paradise, start a business, and get rich. We did not start a business and we did not get rich. Instead, my time in Hawaii would introduce me to an unexpected career opportunity and add 4 addresses on 2 islands to the list just under 4 years. From Hawaii, a quick succession of relocations, all work-related, with the first stop being Culver City, California. Then, Pasadena, California, Pleasanton, California, then off to Washington State, where I added Lake Bay, Gig Harbor, and Tacoma to the list. So wait, now I'm only counting 21. What am I forgetting? Or is this right? See, that's the whole point here. Document it, check sources, make sure it's right, and have a permanent point of reference. Something I can come back to as I navigate this adventure. And I can't even really tell you why at this point, but I really feel like I want to make a point of ensuring that the future and my present intersects with my past. I think it has to do with what I said about missing out on it when I was there the first time. I'll make a point of learning more about each of these stops. I'm just not going to do it until I'm actually physically in that spot again. So speaking of being physically in a spot, let's learn about this part of the country they call the Kitsap Peninsula and Poulsbo, Washington. Geographically, the Kitsap Peninsula lies west of Seattle across the Puget Sound in Washington State in the Pacific Northwest. The Hood Canal separates the peninsula from the Olympic Peninsula on its west side. I've read and looked all over the internet about this place while I explore it, and I'll put links in the description below for anyone out there that might want to dig into it in a little bit more detail. But for starters, the Kitsap Peninsula would actually be an island, were it not for a mile or 2 of forest that separates North Bay from Lynch Cove, a relative ribbon of land that tethers the massive peninsula to the rest of western Washington. The peninsula was literally carved from ice some 15,000 years ago. During the last ice age, all of the Kitsap Peninsula, in fact all of British Columbia all the way up to Alaska and beyond, was under an enormous glacier that towered up to 2 miles high. Wow, 2 miles high? Seriously, a sheet of ice that was up to 2 miles thick in places. What would someday be Seattle, Bremerton, Olympia, Tacoma, Port Orchard, Belfair, Poulsbo, Gig Harbor, all of it, were literally ground to a rocky pulp by the southern lip of the Cordilleran ice sheet, buried under the immense weight of the Puget Lobe. Now, according to Wikipedia, the Cordilleran ice sheet was a major ice sheet that periodically covered large parts of North America during the glacial periods over the last 2.5 million years. Crazy, right? To think that anywhere I step foot on the Kitsap Peninsula today, at one point in time, was underneath a massive sheet of ice up to 2 miles tall. The Puget Lobe? That was the name given to the southern part of the Cordilleran ice sheet, the part that crossed present-day border between Canada and the United States into western Washington. And it's estimated that this particular glacial shift took place some 19,000 years ago. The labyrinth of waterways that ripple the edges of the Kitsap were carved out by the retreating glaciers and melting water. The channels and coves and narrows and passages and inlets and bays that we see now were carved out by the grinding teeth of the last ice age. Essentially, the same method that carved out the entire Puget Sound, and leaving Washington State with one of the most distinctive and complex coastlines in the U.S. To this day, Washington is the second most glaciated state in the U.S. Alaska is the first. I don't know about you, but this guy had to look up what glaciated meant. So for the record, Google tells me that it means covered or having been covered by glaciers or ice sheets. And the name? Kitsap? Okay. In 1792, George Vancouver, an English navigator, credited with completing the most complex survey in history, that of the Pacific coast of North America, made contact with the Suquamish tribe. The Suquamish were among the original peoples of the Salish Sea. The Salish Sea is a body of water encompassing parts of British Columbia, Canada, and Washington in the U.S. It includes the Strait of Georgia, the Strait of Juan de Fuca, and the entire Puget Sound. The sea is named after the Coast Salish, the region's first inhabitants. And it's known for its intricate network of connecting channels and waterways stretching from the Discovery Islands to Budd Inlet. The sea is partially separated from the Pacific Ocean by Vancouver Island and the Olympic Peninsula. Major cities like Vancouver and Seattle are located in this region. Nobody knows how many thousands of years the Suquamish and other original peoples of native Kitsap lived on these shores and in these forests. We may never know. We do know, however, that there are over 120 distinct tribes in Washington. And the earliest human remains found thus far date back to 13,000 years ago. So yeah, these folks have called the Puget Sound home for a very long time. And this goofball, I'm bragging about 23 years. So, where did the name come from, Kitsap? The peninsula, once referred to as the Great Peninsula, and Kitsap County are named in honor of Chief Kitsap, a legendary figure in the peninsula's history. Chief Kitsap was one of the most powerful leaders of the indigenous peoples of the Salish Sea. He led a vast intertribal coalition and built the biggest longhouse that had ever been constructed. Longhouses were a style of residential dwelling built by Native Americans and First Nations people in various parts of North America. The Pacific Northwest coastal Native Americans built longhouses of thick cedar planks. These homes were also called plank houses. They could be around 100 feet long by 25 feet wide, had very low roofs for easy heating. Each family would be assigned a living area and a space of their own within the house. Interestingly, when the owner of the house died, this arrangement ended. Either the house was given away to somebody outside the family or it was burnt to the ground. Wow, burnt to the ground. And we thought eviction was harsh. See, it was believed that if the family remained, the spirit of the departed might either be bothered by or worried about them. So to avoid this, the family had to move out and live elsewhere. The fact is, Chief Kitsap's figure looms large in the early history of the peninsula, and he was pivotal in the time of European contact. To this day, you can visit the site of that longhouse at a spot called Old Man House Park in Suquamish near Agate Pass. Chief Kitsap's longhouse stretched in an incredible 400 by 40 feet. So for the time, an amazing feat of construction, and it dwarfed any other structure that had been built to date. So Now, I say learning about all this stuff is fascinating to me, but what's just as fascinating is learning things around more modern history. When I got to this point, it really drove home why I want to do this. It's overwhelming at first to sit with the reality that I had spent 23 years of my adult life smack dab in the middle of an area that was pivotal to the U.S. victory in World War II. Literally and fact-based, without this area's contribution to the war, things could have easily ended very different. Much of the area's growth began in the years leading up to World War II. As the U.S. feared and began to prepare for a Second World War, the country began building up armed forces all across the country. The Puget Sound's aircraft and shipbuilders, which there were a ton of, shifted into high gear after the bombing of Pearl Harbor. In 1940, the U.S. Census documented 1.7 million residents in Washington state. In under 2 years, the war efforts would add over 250,000 people to that number. Turns out, a combination of the peninsula's strategic and safe, yet easy access to the Pacific Ocean, combined with the area's dominance in the timber industry, catapulted this sleepy little community into the nation's second highest producer of all things military, overnight. The area's basic industry of lumber suddenly played a key role in providing the billions of board feet lumber that would be needed to construct everything from barracks to minesweepers. Here, wait, I found this. Let me find it. Yeah. On a site called historylink.org, this, I'm just going to quote it. It pretty much says it all. Washington, a comparatively small and undeveloped state, played a disproportionately important role in the country's efforts to gear up for the war. In January 1943, Washington's Secretary of State, Belle Reeves, issued a report titled War Production in Washington. A year and a month after Pearl Harbor, she wrote, "No state has been more profoundly affected economically by the expansion of war industries than Washington." By the middle of 1941, migration of war workers was already at full tide, and the relation of prime military contracts in the Puget Sound area to the value of manufacturing products in 1939 was relatively 5 times greater than that for the country as a whole. The relationship of war work to normal activity has been about twice as great as that for Los Angeles and 4 times greater than that for San Francisco. End quote. Wow. Mind-boggling that this little place called the Puget Sound had been plucked from obscurity and rocketed to the top of the list of producers of destroyers, aircraft carriers, aircraft, and so many other war-related items in a matter of months, all because of where it was. A spot on the map that, just some 15,000 years ago was underneath a 2-mile thick sheet of ice. Go figure. So where does a quaint little community on Liberty Bay, on the northern end of Kitsap Peninsula, fit into all this? Well, first, it's called Poulsbo. The city of Poulsbo was settled by Scandinavians in the 1880s. It is said that they were drawn to the area because of its striking similarities to the fjords of Norway, and in fact, it was quickly nicknamed Little Norway. In 1886, I.B. Moe, one of the earliest Norwegian immigrants, proposed that their new little community required a post office and a name. He chose Poulsbo, which meant Paul's Place, for the name of the town. Prior to Euro-American settlement, Poulsbo was right in the heartland of the Suquamish people, who, as I just learned, had lived in the Puget Sound for thousands of years. Poulsbo began its life as a fishing village, positioned strategically on Liberty Bay. The small community remained relatively unchanged for decades. In fact, until World War II, most of the residents in Poulsbo maintained their native Norwegian language. And then, World War II hit the Puget Sound like a heat-seeking missile. And just as it had the entire Puget Sound, the war would kick Poulsbo into hyperdrive. During the war, the town underwent a significant transformation. The U.S. military constructed over 300 residential units in Poulsbo to provide for housing for the workers at nearby Puget Sound Naval Shipyard in Bremerton. This led to a tripling of Poulsbo's population and a shift from Norwegian to English as the predominant language. The town's transformation during the war represents a very American pattern of settlement and growth. It just happened quite a bit quicker for this little town. And today, thousands of folks stationed in nearby Bremerton quickly discovered the charm of the area and began calling it home. Today, Poulsbo's population, around 12,000, is a reflection of how the area's natural beauty, small-town charm, and easy access to the surrounding communities continue to draw folks to this area. As for my time here, I spent afternoons checking out the shops in the Scandinavian-style village on Front Street, which is essentially the heart of the city. On the other side of Front Street, I'd explore and enjoy the city's marina on Liberty Bay. Fun fact, Liberty Bay is the center of an impressive 4th of July celebration every year. For days in advance, boats arrive from all across the Puget Sound to secure their spot in the bay for the spectacular fireworks show. In addition, the town hosts the American Patriots Cruise each year, which is an impressive collection of classic cars from around the region, all decked out in patriotic fare. Every business along Front Street joins in with special events, food fairs, craft fairs, even open-air markets, beer gardens, and barbecues. In total, some 40,000 visitors show up each year to enjoy Poulsbo. And Poulsbo greets each and every one of them with that special blend of small-town charm and Scandinavian hospitality. I'd also spend hours in the Puget Sound Naval Museum in Bremerton. I'll get back to that in a different episode, as well as the Naval Undersea Museum in Keyport. Just trying to soak up all this nautical and military history. For me, I guess this just truly feels like the Puget Sound at its very best. And visiting the area in late spring, early summer, that's just icing on the cake. I think, in summary, I'll quote a YouTube video I found. And again, I'll put links in the description. The video was posted by a Los Angeles couple who had traveled and lived all over the globe. Here's what they had to say about their move to Poulsbo. Quote, "We're lucky to have found this place. It looks like this. It sounds like this. It feels like home. We've been around the world. We've been where it's hot. We've been where it's cold. I guess we wanted a place where there was a little of both. We found such a place in the Pacific Northwest. It's called Poulsbo, and it's our new home. A town of 12,000 people nestled within the ancient fjords of the Puget Sound. If I were a bird, Poulsbo would be on my bucket list. I'd spread my wings and let my faith guide me where I needed to go. I'd take my time here, enjoy the warmth of the sun and the cool of the breeze, always remembering that my time on earth is a beautiful gift. As we now call the town of Poulsbo home, it still feels like a fairy tale. A beautiful port city in America founded by Scandinavians over 100 years ago. A town that keeps their Viking heritage alive through continuing centuries of tradition while incorporating a strong sense of a community and who they are." End quote. Pretty cool stuff. Well done, Poulsbo. It's going to take a minute to absorb all this. And at the same time, I wonder what the next town will teach me. Turns out, this thing called life comes with a lot of rules. Maybe it's time to break a few. Because you can. No, seriously, you can.